Teachers' performance is vital because without good professional practice, teaching it can be ineffectual. So I think the importance of developing your own professional practice through reflection has got to be a vital part of a teacher's toolkit. Donald Schoen, who is probably one of the most prominent people who talked about reflective practice for the professions, he talks about three types of reflection. He talks about reflection on practice, reflection in practice, and reflection through practice. Now, I want to take the first one because I think it's the most important one for your question to be answered about professional development. Reflection on practice is often, almost always done post-experience. So once you have done your lesson, once I have done my lecture, as a lecturer in higher education, I will take some time after I have given a lecture or a session to think about what I've done that is important, to think about how I've performed, to think about the things that I might have done better, to think about the things that went wrong and how I addressed those issues in the classroom, to think maybe about how the students reacted or responded to various activities that we would do during the lesson. And all of those things combined, if I'm sitting down and thinking about those and taking time to reflect on them, obviously that's going to improve my practice for next time. So in effect, it develops not only my good practice, but it also develops my mind, the way I think about teaching and the way I think about how I get my students to learn. So that's, I think, a really important part of a teacher's toolkit. Reflection through practice and reflection in practice, I think, are much more difficult, and these are lesser known types of reflection that teachers engage with. Reflection through practice, I think, develops you throughout your life. It's a journey. Reflection in practice is often difficult to do when you are surrounded by things happening with you all the time. So students may be asking you questions, there may be issues that you need to deal with in terms of behaviour management, there may be things that you have to comply with in terms of the curriculum that you're following or the activity that you're managing or the resources that you are including within your activities at the time. So all of that busyness and the clock ticking down as well at the same time makes it very difficult to reflect in practice. But I think it's still possible to do if teachers are aware that you can actually do this and that actually it can improve your practice as you're actually teaching. So for instance, if something goes wrong and you think, okay, how did I do that last time? Or is this a new issue? How do I solve it from previous experience? That, I think, is the startings of reflection in practice. So I think it's vitally important that teachers do reflect, but there are lots of ways to do it. There are lots of ways, I think, that we can encourage teachers to reflect on practice, and lots of tools that are used as well. I think I'll come to the tools in a moment, but let me just elaborate on the idea of reflective practice and how it can actually evolve into better professional practice. One of the things that happens with experienced teachers, experienced educators, find that when they reflect on practice, it often leads to questions about how they can improve their practice, or a question about why did that child behave in that particular way, or a question about how did this class perform in that particular context. So I think what happens then is the teacher with that question can often turn that into an action research question. Now, action research derives primarily from reflective practice, and the action research need not be a full-blown research program where you're doing experiments and you are bringing in interviews and questionnaires and so on. But what it can do is it can give the teacher an impetus whereby they look at a particular aspect of their practice in the classroom or in the learning environment. And what happens then is they find issues and instances they need to deal with, which in turn reflect back on them and allow them to improve their practice. So I think action research, if a teacher has the time to do it, either within the lesson or subsequent to a lesson, It need not be a large scale, a small scale project with an important question that they need to answer. I think that is one way of improving professional practice, because it does feed back on itself. Now, as to the tools, which I mentioned earlier on, with my own students who are all training in the primary, the elementary school sector, what we do with them is we encourage them right from day one to learn about their own role as a teacher, and also when they're in schools as well, to reflect on their professional practice by keeping a regular blog, which is an online diary, I suppose, in many ways. But it's better than a diary, because what it does is it allows you to broadcast, publicize your ideas, publicize your thinking, publicize your reflection, and it allows you to attract comments from other professionals. Now, for me, that is gold dust. That is a vital part of 21st century teaching, because what it does is it allows you to air your views and your ideas in a public place, get back sometimes very valuable feedback, which is often constructive. Sometimes it can be destructive, but usually it's constructive. And with that, my student teachers find that it's a very valuable process. Daniel Chandler, who's a British academic, said that in the act of writing, we are written. Now, that's a very profound statement when you think about it, because what it actually says, to me at least, is that my thoughts are abstract. My thinking is not necessarily familiar to me until I actually make it concrete in some way. When I crystallize my ideas onto paper, or in this case onto a blog, what it's doing is it's saying to me, okay, this is what you're thinking. And as I'm writing my blog, what it's doing for me is it's allowing me to organize my thinking, sequence it in a particular way so I'm presenting it, and then it allows me to understand better my thought processes and the things that I'm doing in the classroom with my students. And once that is out onto a public arena, then obviously the second wave of learning happens, and that's when it intensifies itself and becomes an even better form of professional practice. So I think reflective practice has many facets to it, and many tools such as blogging, podcasts, videos, which you can put onto the internet, which will allow you to become a better teacher in the end.